Assalamu alaikum and thank you. As Ministry of IT is represented here, I must clarify I'm not the chairman. Minister is the chairman. I'm the CEO of National ICT R&D Fund, now renamed Ignite. I must congratulate the organizers because they have, I think, structured the presentations very well and they've built up, and this gives me an opportunity to kind of tie things together. So hopefully everybody is sufficiently scared about the threat of cybersecurity, all the attacks happening, whether it is on Iran or it is the Russian manipulation of the American election or what have you. The threats are there. We've talked about how this threat is only going to increase over time. We've talked about the need for a cohesive strategy which includes policy like CERT or the Computer Emergency Response Team, or what is called SOC, telecom, banking, or military having specialized high response security centers, or manpower development. And one of the components is innovation. And what do we mean by innovation? By innovation we mean when an idea or an invention gets transformed into a product or service that impacts society. So it has to have an impact. It can't be a lab prototype. And I think it was Dr. Mudassir who pointed out that when we talk about cybersecurity, because our expertise lies in network or application layer, we talk about security threats there, but not about the hardware, and you refer to the Intel chip. But actually, whether it's the hardware or the software, the question arises, are you going to buy a product from overseas or are you going to build a product yourself? And whenever you buy a product from overseas, there's always the threat of there being a trapdoor or a security leak. So my presentation is about how we can build a product in this country. So first of all, when we talk about innovation, we don't talk about the threat today. We talk about the threat 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down, because innovation takes some time to develop. If we develop something in 3 years which tackles today's problem, it's obsolete by the time it's created. So Amar Jafri Saab talked about some of these. I'm just going to mention a couple of these. These are what are called the fourth industrial wave, a coin termed by the chairman of the World Economic Forum, Dr. Klaus Schwab. And at Ignite, which is a government-owned organization administered by the Ministry of IT, our focus is on these technologies. We fund startups, which are new businesses, or innovative projects in these areas which solve problems in health or education or textile or manufacturing. They must solve problems, otherwise it's not an innovation, it's just a research project. But let's take a couple of examples here. For example, if we take artificial intelligence is becoming like IT. It's everywhere. It's replacing or helping doctors, lawyers in America. Young lawyers can't find a job easily because artificial intelligence helps you research the legal database and come up with referral cases or judge profiles much better than any lawyer. Now, that's not only in America. In Pakistan, IBM is trying to sell Shaukat Khanum Memorial Trust Hospital a diagnostic system for detecting cancer, because AI diagnoses cancer 10 times better than any doctor. At Ignite, for example, we are funding a diagnostic for bovine diseases or cow diseases, which detects diseases in cows and helps dairy production and elongate cow life. So this is not something remote, this is something here. Similarly, robotics. So we see that robots are taking away jobs around the world. Even in India, a textile manufacturer by the name of Raymond has announced that 10,000 jobs are going to be replaced by robots. Now, if you do that, you cause unemployment, but if you don't do that, you become uncompetitive and your exports go down further. So robotics, whether in manufacturing or in agriculture, we are funding a firefighting robot which is almost complete and ready to be sold out of a university in Karachi. So these things around us. Similarly, with Internet of Things, Jafri Saab mentioned that, I don't know, 20 billion or 5 billion or 1 billion, but let's just say lots of devices are going to be hooked up. So whenever this happens, greater is the threat. The threat gets multiplied tenfold, that now it's not just about your computers, your data, your phone location, your behavioral patterns, which people like Google and Facebook today analyze your personality profile, and they can tell you better than you yourself when do you want to buy the next shirt, which day of the week you want to buy it, and those sponsored ads will pop up. So all this data is being analyzed, and personality profiles are being created. Today, we can see it. It's nothing remote. And then down the line, we talked about blockchain. Blockchain is a system where any individual can run basically an IT system. So instead of having a financial system in a bank or a telecom company, everybody, each individual runs their own system. And blockchain puts it all together without needing a central authority. When you do that with cryptocurrency, you get Bitcoin, and you get, if people were following what happened in Kasur, dark web and transactions which nobody can trace, and an underground black economy. And then neurotech, already there's research going on. They can read your dreams, your thoughts. They can place the other way certain training modules in your brain. So some of these will happen 5 years down, some will happen 10 years down. Quantum computing is coming, which will break all cryptography code. No cryptography code can sustain quantum computing. That's 10 years down. So, but the point is that all these things are coming. You cannot do anything about them. But obviously you can do something about them. We are here to talk about what we are doing about them, but they are going to come. And they are coming at such a pace that, for example, World Economic Forum says that the concept of cybersecurity in terms of a perimeter defense is no longer viable, and it has to be like cyber resilience, which means you can assume your perimeter will be broken, and when it is broken, what are your other parameters, and what's your time to recovery, and what's your mean time to failure, what's your mean time to recovery. Now, all these technologies which I talked about, this was a busy graph, but the only idea I want to present here is that everything is not happening immediately. There are some things which are 2 years out, there are 5 years out, there are 10 years out, but the key point is that they are happening at such a high pace that, and at such a high level, that unless we have a thought out strategy which includes policy and technology and people training and innovation, I think we're going to get swept away, because piecemeal does not work when there is such widespread and massive change. So when we talk about cybersecurity, what are we talking about in layman's language and in simple language? I think in simple language, we are talking about those 4 elements. The bottom one is the host, which you can say is the hardware, whether in a cloud data center, in your laptop, on your phone, in an internet device, its operating system, or what is called BIOS, that's one part of it. Then there is the data itself, which obviously can be corrupted or stolen. There is the application, like Facebook or like whatever, anything, LinkedIn, e-office, and then there's a network or the network traffic. So I'm going to now give you just 3 or 4 examples of projects that we have funded at Ignite. But before I do that, our products are going to be on the network and application side. We've not really done anything on data. We may do something on one little host type soon, which is a software-defined radio for disaster recovery or military applications. But data-wise, let me give you an example. So, for example, we got a proposal to do for example, today Google offers an API facility through which, if you are a person looking for a job or a site which gives jobs, you can go through Google, you can give all your data to Google, and Google will find you the best jobs around the world through using artificial intelligence. So that's something, but then that's yet another layer of data, of people's whole biodata. Where are they working? What are their aspirations? What are the interview questions? Which is again to Google. And if they want to do profiling, they can do it that much better, other than the location and buying pattern and everything. So we are getting a proposal, we invited one, to do a local Pakistan-built AI-based employment matching software. So to preserve the data. Because like they say, data is the new oil. Data tells you who to sell to what, when. Data tells you all these things. So we're doing that on data. So just a quick couple of examples of some projects we funded before I move on. So for example, one thing that we are about to, this is something which we funded a while back. The reason we funded, by the way, about 17 projects, a little over 200 million rupees. I'm just going to give a couple because otherwise it will be information overload. But this is one project which was back then machine learning based. And as you can see, this used network packet marking for security. Wherever there was a suspicious packet, it was marked. And in this particular case, a company called Plum Grid was formed around it, and it was sold to one of the big software giants, which is VMware, and that was a good success. Of course, success for the principal investigator, and then a lot of benefit to VMware, which is an American company. One that we are about to fund is again based on artificial intelligence, and it uses artificial intelligence to look at network alarm patterns to predict what kind of attacks could happen. So again, this is something. Sorry. So artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence, like I said, it's like information technology is going to be everywhere, and this one looks at suspicious patterns which it can detect better than any network operator or network operation center. So this is something we are going into, which we feel is an important future direction for network cybersecurity. This enables radio for special applications, and this is something which allows kind of 5G, 5th generation communication technology for radios, again in a highly secure fashion, and this looks at the host or the hardware as well. So this is another thing that we are about to fund. This is basically an RSO for access to a secure location. This uses not just your regular RFID chip, but on top of the RFID chip, it uses other authentication such as your password or your biometrics. So it enhances your regular RFID entry where somebody with the vehicle can just go through. So, and then we have many other examples of projects which we are funding, which I don't want to overload. But now to step back and go back to the idea of how do we come up with a strategy. We don't have a strategy, by the way, but there are some principles we want to use to come up with a strategy. And maybe there are some people in this room as well who can help us and work with us to come up with a strategy. But first of all, like we mentioned earlier, there's today's threats and there are future anticipated threats. And then there is the host, there's the data, there's the application, there's a network. Now, given this through and through, what is of high importance or a high threat to us, for which we have a high capacity, which is the top right, right now? Maybe, for example, artificial intelligence, I think, is an area where we are relatively deep in Pakistan. So we can use artificial intelligence to detect threat patterns, for example. But some other on the host, designing our own chips or manufacturing our own chips, not application specific, but general is a tough area. So depending on that, we rate out. Top right is probably the highest priority. After that is top left, which is high importance but low capacity, but capacity that we can build up over 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. And this is how we come up with a prioritization. And then once we come up with a prioritization, in my mind, there are 4 in each area: application, network, data, or host. There are many different possible applications. For example, deep packet inspection, where each packet, where we are also funding a project, it actually looks inside every packet and prioritizes traffic or blocks certain traffic or looks at security threat and other such areas. We, number one, should be keeping a track of or an eye on all areas, because areas keep changing and threats keep changing. Few people can predict what's going to happen 2 years, 3 years out. In certain areas, we can build a local product, and in other areas, a global component, global product. Now, it is very tough to build these inside the government or inside the military. And for example, I'd like to give one example. I think it is a 15-year-old example, when the United States Department of Defense tried to build a secure database, and they spent $60 billion, 60, and they failed. Because unlike, let's say, nuclear or missile or aircrafts, which have 30, 35, 50-year product life cycles, here it's 1 or 2 years, and you just can't keep pace in a bureaucratic organization. So how can we keep pace? I'll just mention that. But the idea here is that I think certainly in 1 or 2 niches, we should go for a global product. And in others, so we got to focus and get on the stage. And why is that? Why do I think that's possible and that's not a pipe dream? Is this next slide. First of all, and this is my Last slide. First of all, for many, for decades, we've been talking about industry-academia linkage, particularly in Islamabad, and it's not really happened at that level. What we do know is that worldwide, the organizational entity which has created innovation is the startup. And today, the 5 most valuable companies in the world, Apple, Google, or Alphabet, its parent company, Facebook, Microsoft, were all startups. And 15 years ago, they were banks, and they were banks and like ExxonMobil, oil companies, General Electric. Now they're all startups. In China, it's startups, Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent. In India, it's startups, Flipkart, Snapdeal. So these are startups which are bringing industry research or academic research, government, and bringing it together and delivering results. So we in Ignite are also focused now, since this last 1 year, on focusing startups rather than these academic projects. So they bring all these together. And these are some of the existing, the particular players, the government startup industry. I should add Neomatics to that name as well in startup industry. And why do I feel that we can build a world-class product out of here is the bottom line. There are three companies which are absolutely world-class. Spark Ignition, AI based out of Austin, Texas, raised about $300 million. They hired just a freshly retired 4-star US general. Elastica and FireEye, which is a $4.5 billion company, which are 3 of the biggest cybersecurity companies in the world, and they were all founded by Pakistanis or Pakistani Americans. Amir Hussain, Rehan Jaleel, and Ashir Aziz. And Ashir Aziz built much of FireEye technology in Islamabad. So this is all possible, and that's what we want to do more of. Thank you.